You got us into this parking lot, pal. Now you get us out. You want out of this parking lot? Okay.
We're back. Couch is back. And I heard Evan was talking some smack about opening couch bits. You know what? You know what I have to say to you, Evan? I have nothing more to say to you than this. There. That's the end of that conversation. I have frequent intrusive thoughts, and sometimes they're deadly.
Do it. No one will ever notice your pinky's missing.
Sometimes they're spooky.
Someone is totally living in your attic and you don't know it.
Or sometimes they're just good points that I've never considered before.
Dude, museums and video games are so cool.
Wow, that's actually a good idea. Thanks.
No problem. Also, did you know your dog can totally kill and eat you and have no remorse for it?
He's not wrong.
It's a pretty outlandish topic to think about, but when you actually dig deep, there's a lot of examples of museums and video games, whether they're thematic statements or Easter eggs or fun behind the scenes stuff. So let's wrangle up some examples and together we'll rustle up one wingding of a conclusion. But not in this, because what self-respecting museum guide would be caught dead in this?
Maybe a cowboy guide?
That's a fair point.
Buster Buddies includes famous paintings and works of art, like the Gleaners, shown here. These works serve as backdrops for each level. Being the silly people that we were kind of hoping to see mannequin piss in the background.
Has anyone checked on Bethesda? Because last I saw, they love to put a metric ton of museums and games that they both make and publish. Dishonored 2 has the Conservatory. Wolfenstein: The New Order has the Space Museum. Oblivion has the Museum of Oddities. Skyrim has the Dawnstar Museum, the Embalming Museum, and the Dwemer Museum. Elder Scrolls Online has like 10, but I couldn't tell you a damn thing about them. Fallout 4 has the Museum of Freedom, the Museum of Witchcraft, and Wixton Shovel Museum. Fallout New Vegas has the Boomer Museum and Vault
21.
Fallout 76 has the Mothman Museum and the Civil War Cemetery. Fallout 3 has the Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Monument, the Museum of Natural History, the Museum of Technology, the Museum of Nuka-Cola, and the most important museum of all, the Museum of Dave. All hail Dave. For those of you keeping track, that's 29 different museums across 9 of Bethesda's biggest titles. I'm sure, due to the staggering size of these games, that I've even missed some. And I'd like to stop here and discuss Fallout 3 because it's the only game that I've discussed so far that has any credence to have so many museums in it. If you've been to Washington, D.C., then you're probably familiar with the Smithsonian, but for those of our international audience, I've got a bit of a refresher for you. This institution is based in the capital and runs 17 museums, a zoo, and many different kinds of art galleries all in the DC area. These are internationally known and house some items of unthinkable value. The key place to visit when going to DC is the National Mall, not to be confused with the Mall of America located in Minnesota. The National Mall isn't your typical capitalistic cesspool, but rather a long stretch of city that goes from the Lincoln Memorial all the way to the White House itself. In between those are many classic Smithsonian museums. Now let's juxtapose this with why do all of my VHS tapes end up getting overrun with episodes of MASH? This is a real problem I need to get fixed. Anyway, when I was in 6th grade, I was part of the Toy Invention Club, a group that would meet and use engineering and math to try and prototype a toy. Ours was a little jousting game that was sort of both jousting and rock, paper, scissors. We were able to prototype it and actually got into the finals that was hosted in Washington, D.C. While we didn't end up winning the competition, we did get a whole day in D.C. to ourselves, and all of us being nerds, we decided to spend sunrise to sunset visiting as many museums as we possibly could. While 6th grade is a hellscape of hormones and hiding from bullies, that one day kind of made it all worth it. That's more of an anecdotal way to say that I was completely blown away by something that I'd seen in real life turned into a video game. The best part about this is that since the story is set in such a far-off apocalyptic future, I can easily suspend my disbelief and become immersed in the video game version of a real place that I was at. Well, that is until the horde of super mutants guns you down because the whole area is an inescapable horror of war, death, and frustration. But that covers the real-life museums. What about the other two? Sierra Petrova's home acts as a shelter to all things Nuka-Cola. This resident of the Waste is on a crusade to preserve the history of Nuka-Cola and find its secret recipe, but it's a terrible place for her to kick her Nuka-Cola quantum addiction. No, like seriously, she's the only one in the entire game that's noted as having a Nuka-Cola quantum addiction. Kinda makes you feel bad for giving her 30 in that questline she gives you. But she does make a reoccurrence in the Fallout 4 Nuka World DLC, but then that raises the question as to who's watching the museum back in DC. But nothing, and I mean nothing, comes even close to the sacred temple that is the Museum of Dave, located centrally in the heart of the bustling metropolitan city known as the Republic of Dave. The exhibit on the whole is a bit sparse, but this is the place where you get the perception bobblehead, so it's a must visit for any playthrough of Fallout 3. Upon exiting, the gift shop is on the left, and don't forget to rig the ongoing election to keep Dave in power before you leave the Republic. Now on to some of my other examples. First up, we have Blather's Museum in Animal Crossing. A staple of the franchise, this museum serves as a visual record for all the players' accomplishments. There is nothing more satisfying than seeing the tanks filled with all the fish I caught. New Horizons does a beautiful job of styling the exhibits in a way that could be seen in a real-life museum, as opposed to the earlier entries in the franchise where it was just laid out rather simply. It also just serves as a great place to take pictures with your friends. On a similar note, Stardew Valley also hosts a museum, but the last time I played a Harvest Moon type game, I was legally deemed lost or considered dead for about 2 years. So for the sake of those I love, I haven't played this game yet. Dead Rising 3's Museum of Zombies serves to fill the gap between games by giving backstory mixed with never-before-heard lore. This acts as a weird way to retcon the games into fitting more cohesively, but Dead Rising 3 already does a good job of dissolving any of the spirit from Dead Rising, so a smooth narrative should be secondary in the writers' minds. GTA 4 has a couple of museums, but most folks tend to focus on the Libertonian. Don't let the sign out front fool you, renovation's not gonna stop Nico from destroying these priceless fossils. There is also a story mission that takes place in this museum. Coincidentally enough, it's the only place where all three of the main protagonists from the main game and the 2 DLCs meet up. Namco Museum. I get that it should be self-explanatory, but there's a twist. This is single-handedly one of the best ways to package a collection of older games. If I'm buying this, odds are I really like these games and I want to immerse myself in them in any possible way. But how can I possibly immerse myself into an arcade game? By theming an entire room for it, by updating the music and separating all these games through 5 different CDs, making fans buy more.
Something tells me that last one's not right.
This series suffers from the limitation of the PS1, as well as the general spookiness of that era. This doesn't feel like a museum, more so like a Namco-based creepypasta. Luckily, it got reworked into a version for the GameCube that doesn't actually come with the museum part. Okay. Well, the Xbox 360 got a version, so that's gotta be it. No, it's in fact even less than the GameCube version. Wait, what about the one on the Switch? Dude, why do all of these versions of Namco Museum keep getting worse and more unoriginal? Bandai Namco, get your shit together. I am legally obligated by the state of Evan to tell you, yes you, the viewer, that Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Origins has a pretty neat museum. That is all. I'm just messing around. I didn't really know this example existed until late in the writing process, but damn, this is cool. It's like Ubisoft heard that someone was considering using their game to reconstruct the Notre Dame Cathedral and said, hey, it's high time we double down on this like edutainment stuff. This whole tour of the Pyramid of Egypt is nothing short of fantastic, and same with the Parthenon. I honestly don't know if I'll ever get out to Egypt or Greece in my lifetime, but to get a somewhat up close and personal tour of the pyramids and the Parthenon is just nothing short of awe-inspiring. Come on guys, you really didn't think I would make this video and not talk about Payday in some way? In the mission titled The Diamond, you have to make your way through a high-security museum, disabling cameras, finding access keys, waiting for time-locked doors to open, and crossing tiled floors that are booby-trapped, all for a massive diamond. You could also loot artifacts along the way, or running guns blazing. Either way, this setting is a shoo-in for this title and helps us alleviate that fiendish desire to partake in a real-life museum heist. Condemned 2 gets the award for most original museum that fits the theming of the game, with its medieval torture exhibit. Now let me take that award right back and break it across my knee because I can't see a damn thing in here. I know that this game is supposed to be drenched in darkness, but man, this is the one level that I'd like to get distracted by. I can't get too mad here because it works well within the narrative and with the overall aesthetic, but for the sake of this video, no lights, no like. Sticking along the spooky museum theme, the Silent Hill Historical Society found in the second game is everything that I don't want and more. It's a small section of the game that gives you a little bit of backstory from the town. At least, that's what my resident Silent Hill expert Nathan tells me. I live in constant existential horror, and I'm not gonna add to that by playing this game. Attention! I am being bullied into discussing the game Warframe, a massive title that I have no interest in playing because frankly, it's intimidating. But due to all these names you are seeing on the screen right now, I must talk about it in order to keep my lunch money this week. So, without further ado, here's the Laverian is a section of the game that gives backstory on different characters and their weapons. Not a bad introduction for new players to the series. As far as museums go, it's a bit small, but the sleek aesthetic and narration go a long way with making this a decent experience. Now if you'll excuse me, I've got to go back to ignoring this game for as long as humanly possible. I promise I'll get to it one day, Shaggy, but I don't think I'll be able to get to it this decade, my dude. Speaking of Shaggy though, the first level of Scooby-Doo Classic Creep Capers for the N64 starts off in a museum. I honestly can't think of a more perfect setting for a Scooby story. It's like a sort of light horror version of the Night at the Museum, where instead of all the things coming to life, only one does, and it's the Black Knight, and he follows you around like Mr. X in Resident Evil 2. Come to think of it, this whole level feels like a ripoff of that formula. While this is an example from a game that is, by all accounts, not good, it does have some very fun Easter eggs hidden around it. Here's a prime example of why you shouldn't compare Nathan Drake to Indiana Jones. Indy would have never done that. This isn't Drake's only tango with the museum life, but it sure is indicative of how he feels about historical preservation. Then there's the Natural History Museum found in the PS1 title Parasite Eve. Here you get to fight a skeleton Triceratops and T-Rex, so pretty much the coolest thing you can find on this list. I do hope that this game gets the Final Fantasy VII remake because this section would look amazing on next-gen graphics. Can't forget about the Wii classic real-life firefighter. Everything's destroyed here. A+ Museum. Medieval 2 sees Sir Daniel Fortesque waking up in a museum after a Egyptian tablet wakes him up, as well as the other exhibits. What do you mean I'm reaching my limit on Night at the Museum references? One left? Fine. This level acts more as a tutorial. I think a museum is a great place for a player to learn how the game functions, using certain exhibits as a small interaction to showcase the mechanics. Not to mention the fact that this game is a sequel and a museum is a perfect place to give backstory or the cliff notes on the last game for those who forgot or just didn't bother to play the first title. But alas, this is a PS1 title and the space for ideas like that just isn't available. But seeing how the first game got an amazing treatment with the remake, I can only hope that they spice up this area if they do so choose to remake the sequel. Batman Arkham City has easily one of the most perfectly stylized and visually pleasing museums on this list. The colors, the bombast, the ability to interact all make this a top-notch setting. Not to mention it fits well with the perceived decadence of the Penguin's persona, but it also shows the decay into, well, what he is now. So those examples are all well and good, but obviously I've saved the best for last. Call of Duty Modern Warfare has one of the most iconic and fun museum sections I've ever played. There's a catharsis mixed with a silly fun that I've almost never felt before. After beating the game, the player is treated to a museum of vignettes of their previous adventures. It feels refreshing to see your victories in one last hurrah before putting the game down. On top of that, there's a cheeky red button that you can press that makes everyone in those vignettes attack you. Now I know that I just spent a minute telling you about how good Arkham City's thematic museum was, but the top spot truly goes to BioShock Infinite and the Hall of Heroes. Not only does this section tell you a great story that is essentially confined to that area, but so too does it also dig into the deep roots of Columbia and show you the foundation that it was built on. That may sound like a lot, but this section stands out in my mind because it's a setting that is begging to be explored and have every detail scrutinized. The museum serves as an interesting analogy to the real world as well. When history is written by the victors, it's so rare to ever experience things from the other side. Going through this museum after you found out that Colombia is a floating city of racists, only to discover that their feelings are empowered by a history of victory and colonialism, stokes the fire in the player's heart to destroy the city and all it stands for. It's a powerful moment and one that really only video games can provide. It would seem like the folks over at Irrational, God rest your soul, RIP, Sweet Prince, really knows how to put together a museum. Due in part to the fact that they've already made one in BioShock 1. This is a deep pull that most folks will have missed by no fault of their own, but packed in with the Ultimate Rapture Edition came the Museum of Orphaned Concepts, a non-canon BioShock experience where you can see everything from art to abandoned models. The first time I ran into this, I was floored. This is my dream museum. I often consider BioShock my favorite game of all time, so imagine my excitement when I get to see not only abandoned concepts and art, but also it's showcased in the same aesthetic stylings as the game itself. That is the best possible museum experience. Like I said before, some of these models were actually fully finished, and some can be even seen in early test demos. Take, for example, Stitchy here. This was the first version of a splicer. He's fully voiced and fully animated with hit reactions, kinematics, and the works. Yet they threw him out like yesterday's chips. The team thought it wasn't good enough, scrapped it, and declared, and I quote, "This is probably the worst abortion that Irrational has ever made." That seems a bit harsh, but I guess that really shows their dedication to the game because I honestly think he looks fine, but I'm also not seeing the full picture like they were. This area was later ported over to the remastered version, so odds are more people have seen it now. But to quickly follow up the sequel to the Museum of Orphaned Concepts, we have the Colombian Archaeology Society, which can be found in the Clash of the Clouds DLC for BioShock Infinite. Same idea as before, but now we get the full version of the songs that they reworked for the game. We also get a second section of the museum where we can find more voxophones with deeper lore. The catch here is that you have to play through the DLC in order to unlock any of this. This DLC is an interesting wave-based take on the normal game where you get to focus on just the mechanics. It's pretty fun. With each victory, you obtain money that can be spent on upgrades or buying aspects of the museum. Obviously, I love museums. I really hope that's evident by this point. But there is no more motivating a factor in a game for me than knowing that my hard work is going to build these exhibits. The Ratchet & Clank series also does a similar thing, but you have to 100% the game in order to get there, and I really don't have time to do that before this episode goes out, so I'll just mention it at the end. Thanks for watching, and thanks to all the names on screen for helping me find some of these examples. If you would like to help us with future episodes, feel free to jump on over to my Discord, where I field questions and talk to people. It's a great place, and the 1117 Discord will come eventually. And now, I'm going to read a comment that piqued my interest on the Halo Killers video. If you leave an insightful and or interesting comment on any of our socials or in the comments below, I'll be sure to read it. Or Evan will. Or we won't. I don't know. This is something that I found fun. Anyway, D2 writes, Jaws 3D, clip 9 of 9, movie clip, The Exploding Shark, 1983 HD. Thank you for calling me out. I get that it's an overused meme. I get it. I'm sorry, I just needed it for a reference. Throw me in editing jail. Thanks for watching. Wait, hold on. I have one more Night at the Museum reference. To be frank, I don't know how I missed this, but Night at the Museum Battle for the Smithsonian had its own game on the Xbox 360, DS, and Wii. It's not all that great and easily boasts one of the worst Ben Stiller models I've ever seen.